The end of the line was coming for the steam locomotives. As early as the 1940s, a new breed of locomotive known as the diesels were taking over. At first, they worked well alongside their steam counterparts, but as time went on, the diesels found themselves doing more work as they needed less maintenance and never needed to be turned around like a steam engine. The steam engines were moved around from place to place and even given different jobs than what they were designed for. In the end, though, the engines would face a future they never wanted, to rust away in dark, miserable scrapyard. Canadian National number 2578, an engine with the front wheels and 8 driving wheels, was one of them. For years, the engine had served the Canadian National well, but now she was being reduced to a rusty mess in the scrapyards in Alberta. Other engines were there too, and many were in various states of repair. Some sadly had already been scrapped and their remains taken away to be melted down. 2578 had already lost 2 of her sisters, 2577 and 2579, and feared she would be next. A scrapper came over with a torch. "Should we cover up this one next?" he asked, pointing the torch to 2578. "Why not?" said the foreman. "It's just taking up space in our yards, and there's more of these useless things coming in. Have fun destroying it." He chuckled and walked away. "Please don't," whimpered 2578. "I can still be a reliable locomotive." "Not according to Canadian National, you're not. Now be quiet. This will only take a couple of hours." 2578 shut her eyes, prepared to face a horrible end. The torch was lit and was about to cut into the right side cylinder, when suddenly there came a shout. "Get away from my locomotive, you monster!" The scrapper dropped the torch in surprise. It was then picked up by another man in a business suit, who shut it off. "What's the big idea, bud? I've been told to scrap this piece of junk." The man stared at the scrapper firmly. "Well, there's been a change in plans, you idiot. I have just bought this fine locomotive, and we're taking it out of your scrap yards." "But you can't," objected the scrapper. "I can, and I have." He pulled out a piece of paper, which was a bill of sale. "Now, unless you want to settle this matter in court, I suggest you take your stupid little torch and get out of here." The scrapper, disappointed, grabbed the torch and walked away. "What a bunch of fools these people are, thinking diesel technology is better. Well, it's not. Diesels are breaking down everywhere, costing them even more money." 2578 looked down to the man. "Excuse me, sir, but who are you? And why did you save me?" she asked nervously. The man turned back to face the locomotive. He climbed onto the cowcatcher and looked up to her face. "Well, my dear loco, my name is Robert Gagnon, and I'm the first manager of the new Freedom Railroad, and we need you to work on the line." 2578 sighed. "For how long?" "Well, forever, I hope." 2578 was confused by this. Forever? But what about diesels? They're replacing steam engines all over the place. It's the end of the line, they all say to us. The man scoffed. "Pa, that's complete garbage. There's nothing wrong with you steamers that a little repair and paint can't fix. Besides," he added, "I hate diesels. They're too loud, smelly, and they don't look like they are living machines. The Freedom Railroad will run with only steam." Only steam. The locomotive shut her eyes and blinked several times to see if she was dreaming. She wasn't. "Yes, only steam," said Robert. "And with you engines on our lines, we'll be able to provide service to all the towns and cities our line passes through, and we'll show the world what you can really do." "It sounds wonderful, but where is this Freedom Railroad? Is it on the other side of the border?" "I've heard many of our engines have gone over there to live out second careers." Robert shook his head. "No, they're not going to America. Many of their steam engines are being scrapped like the Canadian steamers. No, you will be transported by boat and lifted to our docks, where you will be repaired and put to work." Another man stepped forward at that moment. "Is this one ours, Robert?" "Indeed she is, Brian," Robert nodded. "But before we move her, we better check to see what work we'll need to do." The man known as Brian nodded and went to work inspecting the engine. Robert turned back to 2578. "That man is our best mechanic. Brian Mason is his name. If there's anything broken on you, he'll fix it in a jiff." "Well, it'll be good," smiled 2578. Mr. Mason checked 2578 over several times, and soon came up to speak with Robert. They ran her quite a bit, I can tell you. "She's got a lot of rust underneath. Her firebox has got cracks in it, and don't get me started on the connections between the tender and 2578. "Can she be repaired, though?" asked Robert. Mr. Mason nodded. "Yup, she can be repaired. Once in our workshops, we'll give her all the repairs she needs." "Good, glad to hear it. Now let's get some tow trucks out here and get her to the docks." Robert looked over his shoulder. "I don't want 2578 to stay here any longer, not with those lame-brain idiots stuck in the area." "No worries, Robert. I already phoned for tow trucks. They should be here real soon." "Thanks, Brian." He then heard a rumbling sound. "Missed breakfast again, have you?" Mr. Mason nodded with a nervous chuckle. "Why don't you go get something to eat? I'll watch over our engine." Mr. Mason nodded and went off. Robert looked back to 2578. "You're the first of our engines, but you won't be the last one, I can promise you that. I will tell you this, though. We will be buying engines from all over the place. Some from your rivals. Can I trust you to put your differences aside and give them a good welcome?" "Yes, sir, Mr. Gagnon. I won't let you down." "I'm very glad to hear that, and just call me Robert." A thought then came to him. "You know something? It'll be really hard for us to remember the numbers of all you engines. Maybe we should give you names that could help." "A name?" "Yes, a name for an engine. I hear several engines in Britain have got names, and they're working hard every day." Robert stepped down from the plow and thought it over. Finally, his face lit up. "I got it. From this moment onwards, we will call you Rebecca." "Yes, Rebecca will do nicely. Rebecca is such a beautiful name. I love it." "Thank you, Robert." They waited half an hour for Mr. Mason to return. Several scrappers came over to try and scrap Rebecca, but Robert sent them on their way, shouting angrily at them, "If you don't get those stupid things out of here, I'll really give you idiots a scare you won't forget." Finally, their mode of transportation arrived. Two tow trucks and a crane appeared. Mr. Mason stepped down from one of the cabs. "I got a crane here to since they jammed 2578 in here with the other engines." Smart thinking, Brian. "Oh, and she's Rebecca now." Mr. Mason smirked. "Already naming the engines, huh? Well, I thought it would be best." The crane went to work right away. It lifted the tender out of the siding first and onto the back of the first tow truck. As it was being tied down, the crane went to work lifting Rebecca out of the siding. The foreman of the scrapyard walked over angrily. "You won't be able to save all the locomotives. Heck, you won't be able to save this sorry loser. Your railroad will be shut down, and we'll see this one again. She will be cut up." "Yeah, sure, whatever you say, dum-dum." Robert turned and watched the lifting operation. "Easy does it," called Mr. Mason. It was hard on the crane, but in no time at all, and with no problems, Rebecca was placed gently onto the back of the tow truck and tied down. "Will you be able to save any of these locomotives too?" Rebecca asked Robert. "Not today, Rebecca," he said with a sigh. But quietly, he looked over his shoulder and whispered, "But that's not to say we won't return and tick these guys off even more." He winked. Rebecca giggled as the last of the chains were tied down, all set and ready to roll. Mr. Mason and Robert climbed into the tow trucks, and with several honks, they started away. Rebecca passed the other engines, who wished her safe travels. She was sorry to leave them behind, but she was glad to leave the scrap yards. The overhead sign for the front of the yards just missed the top of her funnel. "Phew, that was close," she sighed. They traveled along the road heading to the nearest docks. They passed cars, trucks and buses along the way. And while not everyone was pleased to see a steam locomotive being moved, many were cheering. "Another one has been saved," they shouted. Rebecca smiled just hearing that. At least some people still love us. Soon they reached the docks and found a big ship waiting for them. Cranes lifted the tender on board first, then lifted Rebecca off her trailer. She had no idea what to expect from her new home, but one thing was for sure, there would be no more threats of being scrapped.